Hello and welcome everyone to a special ACFCS Spotlight interview. Today we're going to be talking to Hollie Nadel, a trafficking survivor and dedicated advocate whose lived experience and leadership helped shape ACFCS's Understanding and Detecting Human Trafficking Learning Module. I'm Erin O'Loughlin, Senior Director of Training for the Association, and I was lucky enough to work closely with Hollie, as well as my colleague Cheyenne Visca, on putting this learning module together. In this conversation, Hollie will share practical insights on how trafficking can present in real life, the warning signs professionals are most likely to miss, and what a survivor-centered response looks like when concerns arise. We'll also explore how education and awareness can translate into meaningful action across the financial crime and compliance community. And with that, thank you so very much for being here, Hollie. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much, Erin. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm so grateful to have gotten the opportunity multiple times to work with you in this space and continue to work with you and build that model. So a little bit about me. So as mentioned, I'm a survivor leader and advocate, and I am currently serving as the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for Three Strands Global Foundation. I work and live in the DC area because at Three Strands specifically, I focus on leading all federal and state legislative efforts for the organization. But to tell you a little bit about the organization as a whole, our mission statement is prevent, empower, and unite together to end human trafficking. We provide prevention education across the United States. We believe that prevention is our strongest defense against this awful crime. If we can prevent it from happening before it happens, we'd like to do that. Empower, we have a drop-in center in Sacramento where we are headquartered, where it is a space for survivors both of trafficking and those that are vulnerable can come and drop in. They can get food, they can take a shower, they can do laundry, they can use our computers, they can have access to clothing. And so it's really a space that meets people where they are, and they're assigned to case managers. And we also have our Employ Plus Empower program where they will work with workforce development specialists to gain specific professional development and training. And actually, the case manager will work with them until they go into sustainable employment. And so that's a wonderful program because, preventing survivors from being re-exploited, so much of that is making sure that they can move into sustainable employment. And then Unite is obviously where I come in with all things policy, legislation, coalition building. In addition to that, as we've come together and work together, you know that I do a lot of work at the intersection of financial crime and human trafficking. This is an area that has become a huge, passion for me to work on in terms of education, working with financial institutions to ensure that they understand how this happens, what this looks like through their systems, really monitoring the financial footprint and being able to highlight the different patterns for the analysts. And I was so grateful to partner with you guys on our module to be able to further highlight that, and also what, the front of house staff can do to highlight these indicators, because it's so important that those within the financial sector can understand. And then also for when this is happening, I will often say, as I'm training analysts, I'll say, when you get that sort of gut feeling that something might not be right when you're looking at data on an account, sometimes that little thing that you notice could actually be human beings being harmed on the other side. And that really makes analysts look at things differently. And so it was, so fulfilling for me to be able to do our training together to really highlight all the ways that this happens. And so I truly cannot emphasize enough for all of you on the other side watching this to please take our training. And I will turn it back to you. I know I just went into many things. I'm very passionate about this topic.
This is great. I'm glad that you talked about all the different things that you do because it's why we asked you to come with us. I wasn't sure you're even going to be able to have the time to work with us on this, but you managed to give us the time to be able to help us and guide us on this. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the fact about how you were so instrumental in the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act. Can you explain that a little bit more? What is that and how did you play in that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Super excited that after 9 years since this bill was originally authored by Congresswoman Ann Wagner, we finally got this across the finish line, and it was signed into law on January 23rd, 2026 by President Trump. And this law creates a way forward for survivors that have been criminalized at the federal level for certain nonviolent offenses, to have a way forward through vacature and expungement of their records, very specifically, crimes that are tied to their trafficking and victimization. And they will be able to file petitions under this new law to specifically vacate and expunge those records. The other thing is it also has an affirmative defense piece, which hopefully will make it that survivors can avoid the conviction to begin with at the outset by using it specifically as a defense. In my opinion, survivors should never be criminalized for the crimes of their traffickers. And it happens far too often. There's lots of different ways. I would love to specifically highlight, in explaining this law, the concept of forced criminality, which is a form of trafficking that really has not been talked about as much until the last couple of years. It really is another form of labor trafficking where traffickers will under, through force, coercion, threat, all of the items, will make it that their victims are forced to commit crimes for their own personal benefit or gain. And, one of those ways is through, financial crime, which is something that we've talked about a lot, and but there's a ton of different ways that this can happen. And traffickers will be very creative to make it that the victim will take the fall for their crimes. And it's also another mechanism of control where they will often utilize that and say to a victim, okay, if you try to run away, if you try to go to the police, what's going to happen is you're going to go down for this crime. So it often will prevent a victim from seeking help. And so this has been a piece of legislation that, I worked on, provided testimony for, helped with amendments. And I've been so grateful to work with so many incredible advocates, leaders, and, House and Senate members, that have really championed this incredible piece of legislation. It truly will be life-saving for so many survivors.
I cannot stress enough how much you're changing the world for the better. So thank you so much for working with us on this. I was so happy for you when this and for everybody who has experienced something like this. If you're watching this right now, you're probably watching on YouTube. And if you are, you either look to the right or the left, depending on what way you're looking. And you're going to see a video on there with Kevin Metcalf and Alina Donahue. And they give a 1 hour and 30-minute presentation on the forced criminality that Hollie just talked about, and that you can go watch it from literally 90 full minutes. We put on, ACFCS puts on our website, on our YouTube website, I should say, the full webinars that we're doing with the Kevin Metcalf series. and that really go into Alina's story, what she went through and how she's getting through it, and what her story is about advocating for others, just like Hollie's doing. And speaking of that, the story, let's talk about your origin story. What first motivated you, Hollie, to turn your lived experience into advocacy and education?
So, recovering from 8 years of what a federal judge called akin to torture, that involved, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, forced criminality, and finally forced marriage. Um, for me, it would have been very easy for me just to lay down and not want to get back up again. But thankfully, a therapist that I had that really explained to me what had happened to me, quite honestly. I think so. A common misconception that a lot of people don't realize is that so many survivors of trafficking during the actual victimization really have no concept or understanding that what they're going through is actually trafficking. And that was no different in my case. I did not, and that's where I always also talk about the prevention education component, because I often say that if prevention education had been available to me in my school growing up, I might have been able to avoid what wound up happening altogether. I might have seen the signs and the indicators, and I might have been able to more clearly communicate what was happening when I was trying to get help. But as a result of not having that, I didn't self identify it as trafficking. It was a therapist that explained it to me. And that therapist also gave me a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is written by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, and who was also a psychologist. And the main premise of the book is he says that somebody can take away everything from you, but they can't take away your freedom of how you respond. And I basically, thought to myself in that moment, and that, okay, well, I can essentially, lay down and die here. And then these awful individuals that did this to me win. Or I can get up and I can start to fight. And so that's what I did. And so for me, I initially started with, and this is where, again, there's the intersection between the financial piece and legislation. I initially started with working on the Debt Bondage Repair Act, a bill that allowed survivors to self-identify the items on their credit report that were negative items on their credit report that were a direct result of trafficking. In my case, my traffickers put houses, cars, credit cards, everything in my name that they could possibly think of, and let them default. And so when I came out of this situation, my credit was annihilated. And so many survivors experienced this. And so that bill created a way forward. And, when I was able to see that go into fruition, and it was passed in December of 2021, and then I was able to get that relief, and then my credit finally reflected the responsible working professional that I am. And as a poor credit score can, be as bad as a criminal record, and some survivors have both. It limits so many things towards housing, employment. It makes things so much more challenging. But once I was able to see that happen and successfully be able to impact law, that was really what set me down this path of really wanting to continue to work on policies, legislations, work to help fix and educate systems like in the financial sector. And I just really wanted to make sure that I could do everything in my power to make this better for others. If able to prevent it from happening to begin with, like I said, getting out there, educating, bringing awareness, explaining to people how this happens. And then also, if it does happen, providing pathways forward like the DBRA, like the TSRA, so that survivors can reclaim their lives and rebuild. Too many survivors without these kinds of legal recourse wind up just going through a vicious cycle again and again of exploitation.
Wow. Again, I just get goosebumps every time you talk. Did you tell me a while back that also another part of your story is that a bank teller helped to identify the problem you were going through and separate you from your trafficker in front of the trafficker? Was that something that you told me?
So they unfortunately did not do it in a way that I wish that they would have.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
I think what you're thinking about was that I explained that during my experience, there were multiple times, many times, that I was in financial institutions with my traffickers, and it was super clear that something was not right. You know, you can tell from the body language. I was often shaking. They were very close to me. They I remember very specifically being berated by one of them in a huge bank branch in New York City, where everyone was staring at us, and so there were so many specific times and indications that things were not normal and things were not okay. But only one time ever um, did a teller specifically say to me, "Are you okay?" Um, and he did so with my trafficker, several, like literally several inches away from me, glaring at me that if I dare say anything, that the harm that will come. And so something so it was super super frustrating because all I wanted to do was scream at the top of my lungs, like, I need help, please help me. And I couldn't, because I didn't have any. The fact that they didn't separate me, that they didn't, um, do it in a way that made me feel like they could actually follow through and get me the help and support that I need, made me feel like I had no choice but to say that I was okay, even though I wasn't. And so that's something when I do speak to front of house staff, what I try to say to them is if they can come up with a way to separate the person from the trafficker. Now, it is something that has to be very coordinated and thought out. I'm always also very cautious when I give this guidance because I don't want somebody that's trying to help to wind up getting harmed in the process. Because again, a lot of times these traffickers are very violent individuals. And so what I usually advise that they have a coordinated plan of response. They have a signal that they can give, for example, assuming that there's a security guard at the front, some sort of signal, that is kind of subtle, but will get their attention and have them on guard, potentially to call for backup if things could escalate, and that they also locate local resources to the bank branch in terms of a safe house, social services, a medical professional, law enforcement that is trauma informed. And when there is that coordinated multidisciplinary response, there is actually hope of getting that person out from that situation.
Well, I stand admonished. Please admonish me. Just do this because I had heard your story incorrectly, and I had been saying publicly you should, listen to our expert. She was, well, you should listen to our expert, which is you, anyway. But she had been helped with by a bank teller, and that is wrong. So I want to set the record straight here that it happens way more times than I want it to happen. But yes, I'm so glad we're here to set the record straight for your origin story. So thank you for that. And does this speak to you wanting to talk to the financial institutions now based on what you did experience from them and train them?
Absolutely. This
Oh,
has been a
fantastic. Sorry.
big motivating factor. And to your point, my hope is that after they receive my trainings, they can then be that bank teller that does something. Um, And so that is always my hope. It's knowledge is power. And again, when I go and I do these trainings, I am always say, please, like, continue to spread the word. Please continue to educate others. Like, take what I've told you today, share it, domino effect it, because the more people that understand and know how this happens, the harder it is to hide, the more light that we shed on it. The other thing that I really want to highlight as well, where it's been so important to me to work with financial institutions, and organizations like yours to get this word out there and this education out there, is when things are escalated properly, when there is proof in the financial transaction that there is trafficking happening. Um, if it is handled and escalated properly, law enforcement can work with financial institutions to make the case through concrete evidence. And I say that because it is so important to concretely be able to prove this. So often, what happens is victims, such as myself, are forced to testify over and over and over and over again. Whereas it could potentially be prevented if they can concretely make the case in the transactions.
Fantastic. Thank you for clearing that up for us. When you talk about transactions, let's get into the financial touch points. Where do trafficking networks most often intersect with the financial system? Is it payments? Is it accounts? Is it money movement? What do these transactions mean that you just said?
So it can happen in a variety of different ways. In my case, my traffickers were running a lot of finances through my accounts, and then I was forced to go into different financial institutions and withdraw 7,500, 8,000, 8,500, 9,000. Very specific amounts to keep it below the $10,000 red flag, to try um, to try not to draw attention. And that was their way of getting money in and out, into cash form. There's often through these accounts a lot of cash movement. And the other thing too that um, can be kind of complicated is that sometimes it is really hard to tell the victim from the perpetrator account, because so often they are controlling the victim's account. But there often will be some signs and indicators that make it suspicious. Like, a lot of times, if a trafficker has multiple victims that they're working with, there'll be multiple accounts and different names, but a lot of the information will sort of track to the same person. Like, it'll be like the same number, same point of contact on the account. A lot of times people are hard to reach. There are scenarios, like I said, when they're coming into the front of the house, where the victim is not able to say that much, or seems nervous and jumpy, and seems like they're kind of trying to repeat a sort of rehearsed story of what they were told to say. There's also businesses that are set up that are like front businesses for what's happening, where if you look at what the business is, it's registered as something that appears like it should be 9 to 5. And you'll see like large transactions and things happening at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now there's so much that's happening also with cryptocurrency, and that's like a whole nother animal. I mean, the difficulty is that traffickers are, as technology develops and these other forms of currency become available, it does become more complicated, because they have more ways of getting their crimes and illicit activity to happen. However, what I will say is that they all become impatient. They all become impatient and they all become lazy. So when you looked and analyzed my accounts, there were times where transactions went directly to their accounts, you know? And so again, if follow the money and continue to watch it, and that's where I will tell analysts, like, mark it as a high risk account, but don't escalate it too quickly, because if you escalate it, if you scare them off, they move, they shut everything down, you lose the thread. You have to watch it, you have to see where it's going, follow the network, see who might be involved, potentially be able to locate and identify through the connections, the victims involved. There's a lot that can be told, in the footprints. It's just making sure that, you give it the time to really build the case. And I know, now there are some AI software and things that are continuing to be developed to look for certain things, but I still think that there's a fair amount that has to be done by a human to understand some of these nuances that happen in this space.
So when you said that money would go straight to your account and then to his, can you explain that a little bit more? Were they automatic transfers?
They weren't automatic transfers. They were going in and doing like direct, like at one point in time, throughout this time, there were many different accounts at different financial institutions that I had, largely because they kept getting shut down for suspicious activity. But for example, there was a period of time where I had an account at one financial institution, and the traffickers also had accounts at that same financial institution. And so myself and my traffickers both have accounts at Bank A. And so when there are multiple, when it's the same financial institution, many times it's very easy to transfer money from one account to the other when it's the same financial institution. And so you can link accounts. Bank A had it so that accounts could be linked, and so they would just go into my account and they would do a transfer over to their account. It wasn't a regular, like, reoccurring transfer, but when they would get frustrated and wouldn't want to wait for me to have to go into a financial institution and do like the large withdrawals like I was talking about, they would go in and they would just do that. So um, that happened often enough that it was clear, where the money was going.
Gotcha. So not only was it a different IP address logging in to say mobile banking and then just making the transfers themselves, is what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So, and they're probably near you, right? So picking up a different IP address would kind of be a little bit difficult if they were physically near you.
Sometimes they were, and sometimes they weren't. It depended.
Okay. There you go. And the ones that weren't would be easier to pick up on. I've said picking up on IP addresses from the dawn of time since I've entered this industry. Granted, it gets harder and harder with VPNs and more protections put in place. But thanks for clearing that up. All right. And our next and final question that I have for you today, it's a survivor-centered response type of question, Hollie. If a frontline employee at a financial institution suspects any trafficking going on around them, I know you touched on it earlier, but I really want to drive it home. What does a trauma-informed response from that employee look like in the moment? What should they do?
Great question. Yes, so as I kind of highlighted before, but again, I agree with you, it can't be emphasized enough. If a bank branch is able to put in place multidisciplinary protocols, that is the best way to be prepared for something like this and have the most possible success. So what I would recommend is that in general, to be prepared for when this potential interaction occurs. A financial institution should be receiving training and, doing our training, for example, to have the signs and indicators, and the awareness. And then, really working to create a local, multidisciplinary form of defense. And so that's where, again, that means local safe houses. That means law enforcement that also are trauma informed and receive training on human trafficking awareness. And what it looks like, social services, and mental health professionals, medical professionals, because again, these victims likely need medical attention. And setting up like a signal within the bank branch with the security officer, because again, I always want to make sure that if somebody is going to escalate something, that they can do it in a safe way. I never want to encourage someone that's just trying to help to put themselves in harm's way. And so if someone suspects that there's trafficking, and the potential victim is there with their trafficker, I would encourage the front of house person to come up with a reason to physically create distance between the trafficker and the victim. Come up with a reason related to the account that they need to bring them into the back office. Then have these local support, this local support in place, and ready to kind of pull that trigger, a way to be able to get them out the back door, safely. And the thing is that survivors are going to be so terrified to go, or victims at that point in time are going to be so terrified to go against their trafficker. And the biggest thing that I always said and wished is that I wished that somebody had said to me, I can help you, and I promise that I will keep you safe, and actually have a way to do that. And I know I should be cautious when saying the word promise. We obviously never want to promise things that we can't keep. But the thing is that if somebody has a plan in place, if a bank branch has, like I said, the safe house, these providers at the ready that are trauma informed and ready to go, there is a real way of extracting this victim. But they need to make sure that that system is solid, that it's in place, and that it's impenetrable. Because these traffickers are very creative and clever, and the victim at this, when they've come in there, has gone through so much trauma and mental and physical and psychological abuse, that it's not going to be easy to gain that person's trust. But if they can just clearly say, you have another option, I can keep you safe. These are the options that I can offer you to do that. Would you like my help? And there, thankfully there's a bank branch, in Tallahassee, where we've been informed that they've used protocols like this and actually successfully gotten people out. So I say this, knowing that we have been able to successfully do this. It's bringing all the right partners to the table and making sure that they're all educated and understand how to deal with survivors that have come through this kind of experience, or victims at that point.
Thank you so much for your time, to not only today, Hollie, for this quick interview that we've got with you, but for all the work and love and dedication that you poured into our AHT course. We call it we're going to throw it up on the screen here, hopefully in a second. It's called Detecting, Disrupting, Understanding human trafficking. It is on our webpage. You can go to acfcs.org and you can go under training, and then you'll see the AHT certificate course right there, and you can learn much more about it. If you want to, you can use Hollie's code. It's 10% off and 10% to Hollie, which is HNSAVE10. Again, that's HNSAVE10, and you will be having 10% of that go straight to Hollie herself, so she can keep doing this work. We need her out there. We need her telling folks what they're doing wrong. We need her telling folks like me who get her story wrong to get it right, and to make sure the record is straight, and that we're educating folks along the way and making an impact, just like Hollie's making an impact. Thank you again so much. I'm going to give you one last shout out to wrap us up and take us home. Who would you like to shout out to and get your final thoughts?
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate it. And again, can't say enough positive things about you guys and ACFCS. Oh, it's always a mouthful. I always want to make sure I say the acronym correctly. Yes, please go ahead and take our course. It has so many great things in it. It's so educational. I also just wanted to give a shout out, because I did not before when I was talking about the Trafficking Survivors Relief Act, acknowledge all the other bill sponsors. Congressman Russell Fry of South Carolina really led the charge in the last couple of years on this bill. Him and his staff were so incredible, making sure that this sailed through the House, along with Congresswoman Ann Wagner, who I mentioned earlier, Congressman Liu, and then on the Senate side, Senator Gillibrand's office has been working on this for many years, along with Congresswoman Sidney Hyde-Smith. All of those members and their respective staffs have been absolutely incredible, so trauma-informed, such a pleasure to work with. And I'm just, again, so grateful that this piece of legislation exists. I can't say that enough. And yeah, so thank you to all of them. Thank you to ACFCS. Thank you to you, Erin, for highlighting survivor stories and continuing to shed light on this important issue. And again, encompassing the nothing about us without us. You guys do that so well, and I'm so grateful for that.
And there's so much gratefulness going on here. So everybody go out and get your education on, and go to acfcs.org and get certified in detecting, disrupting, and understanding human trafficking. Till next time, folks. Thanks.
Thank you.